Alright, so this is the Class 3 lecture of web design. So what you're going to see here is we're going to talk about internal CSS, some principles of design and elements of art, how to make basic adjustments, and then the assignment. Okay, so we're going to do internal CSS. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you another way of applying it. Okay, so if you remember, there are 3 ways to apply it. Last time what we covered was inline code, which is basically where we apply it right inside the opening tag of an element. Okay, that's inline. Another way of doing it is external, which is we use a wholly separate sheet, a separate file altogether that has .css on it, styles.css. The way we're going to cover today, which we'll probably use for most of the class, is going to be the internal embedded CSS. Okay. So some advantages and disadvantages of this is that it's really good for single web pages. It's going to load on a single page better because it doesn't have to load another page. It's a little bit easier to code because this will be right inside the same document as your HTML, but it's better than doing the inline where it's on every single line, and it can be hard to find what you're trying to do, or if you want to control large areas of things, it's a little bit more difficult because you put it on each individual element. All right. Okay, so let me show you how to apply this. What I did is I took my last thing I did, and I just took the CSS out, just so I could show you it with this. Okay, so anyhow, what you do is inside of the head, because if you remember, the head is the part that you don't see, but it controls parts of the site or the web page that you don't see. So right after this title thing here, I'm just going to go ahead and put style type, and it's going to be text/CSS. All right, and boom, and then just close like that. All right, so you can, let me see, so tile type text CSS, and then you put all your CSS rules in there. All right, so let me talk about what CSS rules. You've already kind of been doing it. You've been putting an opening. You've been putting it inside your opening element, but you've been putting just basically the declaration. But each thing is a rule. So you can see we already did this part, the top and the bottom, and then for each thing we want to control, we put it up here. Now, how this is different is that we don't go directly onto the body and say style. Everything goes inside of here. So at the very top, we're going to say on the body, that's the selector. Okay. We're going to go ahead and we're going to have a property that we want to apply, and then the value we're applying to it. So in this case, I'm going to say the font family, make it Arial, and I'll say the background color, make it such and such color. Okay. And then we'll say on the H1s, do this. All right. So each one of these, this whole part here that has a selector and declaration, that is a CSS rule. So yeah, the selector is the thing that you're going to grab, and the declaration is what you're applying. All right, and a declaration has a property and a value. All right, so let me show you. We'll just kind of quickly apply it here. So I already did this, and I'm just going to kind of do something similar to what I did before. So I'm going to hit tab to tab in, and I'm going to say body. That's going to be my selector. And then I do an opening bracket and a closing bracket like this. Okay, so everything that goes inside this bracket, the opening and closing one, those are going to be the CSS rules. So what we'll do is I'll just do background color like before, background color, and I'm just going to choose bisque, because who doesn't like bisque? All right, like that. So that'll be one property, and then I can do another one. Remember I did this before. I could say font family, and I could make the default this Franklin Gothic thing, right? And end it with a semicolon. So it's this, and then you so you have your property, and then your value, and then you have to end it with a semicolon. Kind of like when you code in other languages, usually each statement has a semicolon on the end, and each block of statements is within brackets. So this would be one CSS rule, and basically this is going to apply to all of those elements. Now let me do another selector. I'm just going to kind of do what I did with, that you saw on the page there. So I'm going to do an H1. So I'm going to say take the H1s, and I'm just going to do one thing here. I'm just going to say make the color, and let's make it right here. It's going to be sienna, like that. Okay, and I'll just save this, and I'm just going to open it up, and I think it was index bare. Here we go. So now you'll see we made the background color this, and then I made this that sienna color. Okay, actually kind of matches. like that. So that's what those two things did. It's a little bit different because I didn't put them directly onto them down here. What I'm doing is saying anything that's an H1 is going to have this color applied. In this case, there's only one body, obviously. So the body is going to have this background color and this applied. And that'll apply to everything therein. Okay? So let's go back here. And if you look, so CSS rules, so these are selectors. These are the type of things that you can select. One is the universal selector. So if you do an asterisk, that means it's going to apply to every element. Don't generally do that. There really isn't a reason to. If you want to apply something to everything, just use body. I'm not sure when you would use that, but it's not a good idea. There's the type selector, which is basically what we did. So an H1, so you select the H1 or a P or a UL or a table or whatever. Whatever the different element names are, you know, think of the different tags, you would select them that way. Now you can also select by child. So let's say we have an unordered list and we want to select each one of the list items. I could do a UL and then the greater than symbol LI, and it will select all the LIs of the UL. Meaning that anything that's underneath that it's nested inside of, it'll select the children of it. You can also do the descendants of an element, so kind of the same thing. You're not going to honestly use these too much. The other two that are going to be useful are going to be class selector and ID selector. Okay, so these two you will use. Basically what it does is it allows you to give an element a specific name, and then you can grab just that element. Now the difference that they both do that, but the difference is that class is you would apply it is that you would apply it to multiple objects, and IDs means it's only on one element. Okay, so that's what you do. So I'll show you right in here what I mean by that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that I want the first two H3s, or actually I'm going to say I want the first H3, I want to put an ID on it. So I go ID, and then I just give it a name, and I'll just do first subtitle. First subtitle, I think is one word, right? So I give it a unique name. This can be whatever I want, just something that's descriptive, but make sure that you keep it consistent. So I'll make an ID called first subtitle. Now what I can do is up here, the key thing you have to put is you have to put the hashtag or pound symbol and then first subtitle, like that, and then brackets. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's only going to grab anything that has that ID on it. In that case, it's just this item. And then I can say, you know, we'll do font size, and I'll just make it larger. We'll say 28 px. Okay, and then I'll save it. And if I go over here and Control R, okay, that didn't really make much difference. Maybe I should make something more significant. Font size, let's try 48 px. Okay, Control S. First, oh, you know why? Because look at, I did EL, subtitle, LE. That's why it was giving me that little warning there. So that's why it wasn't working. You gotta make sure these names are exactly the same. So now let's go back here and Control R. There you go. And now you can see it grabs that one. It's not doing to all of them, just that one. Now, so that's a selector, or that's an ID, and I can do multiple ones of these. So I could do an ID and say I want to do, I want to grab just this specific paragraph. I could do ID equals, and then I'll give it I'll call this second section par. Okay, and I'm actually going to select this, Control C, just so that I know what it is. And again, it needs the pound symbol, and it's second section par. And then I'll just say color, we'll say background color, background hyphen color, just so it's different. And we'll just do azure, I don't know. And did I spell that right? Because it gave me crap about it again. Second section. It shouldn't be different because I saved it. So I'll save that, and then you can see Control R. It'll grab that specific one and only that one. None of the other paragraphs have it. Okay, so that's an ID. All right, so class. You might be like, okay, well that makes sense. So for the class, what you would do is something like this. Let's say I want to also on this first one, I want to put on 2 of the H3s, but not all of them. I want to put something. So I'll go class and we'll call these first two subtitles. All right, and I'm just going to copy this class, Control C, and I'm going to put it also on this one. Okay, so they both have this class applied. This one also has this ID applied. And what I'm going to do is, to do a class, you do dot beforehand, and then it was first two subtitles, like that, and brackets, and then I'll just say, see, first two subtitles, first, it looks right, we'll see if it's right. I'm just going to say line height, I don't know why we'll do that, and we'll just make it 10 px. Hopefully this is noticeable, and I'll save it, and I'll go here, and I'll hit Control R. That didn't look, it's not very significant. Let's do 25. I'm not trying to make it look good, I'm trying to make it obvious. Still not really obvious. Okay, let me do something else, because that's not, I was trying to think of something other than, you know, whatever. So let's do color, and we'll do, I don't know, corner crimson. Hopefully that will show up. Okay, and let's go here, and I'll hit Control R, and there you go. So Humble Beginnings and this one both have that class applied, and so now they both have that, and I could put that class on other things. So like, let's say for instance I wanted to, I'll take this class, I'm going to copy it. It's not the greatest name, C, and I'll put it on this emphasis too, Control V, and then I'll save it. And now what you'll see is it's also on this. So I can make a class that's like, whenever I highlight something, I can put like, you know, highlighted text, and I can make a class called highlighted text. And whenever I want to highlight text, I just apply that class, and it'll apply those settings to those. Okay, so that's why it's a class, but that's for multiple objects. When you do an ID, it's just for one element. Okay, and you can have IDs, and you can have classes, and you can have multiple classes. If I want to put another class in this, I would just hit space and type in another one. Okay, and then I could put that up there, and I wouldn't have to write both of it. I would just, or both of them, I would have to just write the one. All right, so basically what that allows us to do is to specifically grab things and apply it to just those, as opposed to when we use an H1, or if I did an H3, it would apply to all H3s. So it allows me to more specifically grab. Okay. All right. So that's the ID in the class. Now the other thing you're going to want to do is basically, okay, is use the div and whatever. I'm just going to explain one other thing too real quick. Css Theory, because this might start to happen. Basically, it's the idea of what dictates how the CSS is actually applied. Okay, they're just rules. So first one's Cascade Theory. What it means is that the last rule has precedence. Okay, so right off the bat, if you have no rules applied, the first thing that gets read is the browser defaults, right? So if I have nothing in there, the browser automatically decides an H1 is, you know, large and it's bold. Then after that, it will read, if I have an external CSS sheet, it'll read that. Okay, so that will override whatever the defaults are. But then if I have an embedded internal CSS sheet, like we're doing right now, that, even if like an H1, I put an H1 in here and I said make it blue, if this one has an H1 and I said make it red, this will supersede that, because this is the next thing written, red. Then inline would be even farther. So if I specifically on an H1 write, you know, make it yellow, this will actually overwrite this, which this will overwrite this. So the more, that's why it's called Cascade. Okay. Inheritance just means that an element can be affected by more than one rules. And we actually have an example here, because if you look at here, I have the first subtitle and I have the first two subtitles. And what you'll notice is the first one makes it large, but it's also having this one applied to it. So it's doing, you can have multiple rules applied to each one. Specificity, if one rule is more specific than another, it will take place. So an example of that would be this. If I take a paragraph and I make it, like if I do, you know, P and I do a paragraph element. Actually, I'll do one right now. I'll show you this actually. So let's say I do paragraph, and then I'll do font family, And I'm going to go ahead and do what would be the most opposite of what we already have. Where's Times New Roman? Here we go. Times New Roman. Okay, and I save this. What you're going to see is that you're going to see it overrides it. Okay, and the reason why this overrides what I already had was because this font family is on the body. This is more specific. This is a broad action. This is very specific. Now, if I had another selector that was like, I put a class on this P or an ID, and I use that, that would supersede this because that's really specific. Okay, so it's the rule of specificity. Basically, it'll get more specific. You can add this exclamation point important after a property just to kind of, it's just meant to make it, it's like make sure it does it, override whatever's there. I've had this work about never, so you could try it, but I haven't had that good luck. So, all right. Now let me show you these grouping elements, and then the next part is the art stuff. Okay, so what's super useful is this. If you were to look at my site here, what you'll notice is I have these sections, right? But this is supposed to go with this, right? This is like a heading, a subtitle, and then this is like the font or the paragraph. This is another title, and this paragraph associated with this is associated with this. And if you look up here, right, this picture is kind of associated with these things, right? But if you were to look at my code, you'll see there's no real association. I mean, I put spaces in here, but it doesn't actually mean anything. I could take those out. That's just for me to read. But there's nothing to say that these are all together, right? Nothing's nested inside of something else. So if I want to do, like, if I want to take this whole section and make the background blue and make this whole section, make it yellow, and make this whole section red, I can't do that. I could take this H3 and I can take this P element, but I can't do it to the whole thing. So this is actually where this comes in handy. There's a thing called a div and a thing called a span. All right. So what a div does is it allows you to take multiple elements and put them inside of a div or a division. Look at it like you're grouping it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to put some in here. All right. So I'm going to go boom, and I'm going to write a div, and I'm just going to call this. I'm going to give it a class too. Class. And we'll just call it section. Let's call it section. That's not a good name, actually. Call it class, and we'll call it par section, paragraph section. I don't know. Okay, like that. And it automatically gave me the closing, so I'm going to Control X that. And then what I do is I put the closing here, okay, at the end of it. And then I have to take all of these here and just tab them in. Now you don't have to tab them in, but this way it lets me know that these are like parented to this. Now everything that's in here is part of this section, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this to each one. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to put it in here too. Control V, and I'm going to do it here. Control V, and then I'm going to do the close as well. I don't know why I did that. I wanted to do the div. Okay, and then it automatically tabbed in, and I'm going to do the close for down here. Oh, didn't do it that time. No, but it did cut it in. Okay. Tab. And then I'm going to take this whole thing and tab these in, and this one, and tab this in. Okay. So now each one of these are part of that class called par section. I can go up here, and I'm going to go ahead and do dot par section. And then I can do like background hyphen color. And then we'll do, I don't know, dark slate blue. Okay, now what you're gonna notice is when I go to my code and I hit Control R, each section, I only worked on the first one for some reason. I must have screwed something up over here. Hang on a second. Div par section. Close that div. Oh wait, that one's fine. Div class. Oh, because look at it closed itself. That's why it wasn't working. So it wasn't encapsulating the whole thing. There you go. Now that's the close. Okay. Okay. Now let's try this. Control R. Now you're going to see that each section. This has a background in it, so it's more specific, so it's overriding it. But now you can see that I can grab this whole section and do things to it. I can move it to the right. I can move it up. So if I want to have these like next to each other, that's something I can do. Okay. So that's really nice because that'll give me a lot more control, and I can grab whole, like this is now feels like one whole piece, this is one whole piece, and this is one whole piece. So there's a lot of benefits to putting divs. Now, let's say for some reason, so that's what a div does. It basically lets you create sections. That's what you're looking for, divisions, you know. Let's say I want to grab something. Like I want to grab just this thing, this cone, right? And I want to make it, I don't know, bigger or something. So the way to do that is actually with a span. Basically what it does, it's kind of like a div element. It allows you to group something, but instead, oh, I didn't make a separate, this is a bad example, unless it's in here. No, I don't see it. All right, well, I got to switch that. What that allows you to do is it allows you to put, to grab like an element and grab like just part of an, like a section. So I'll show you. So I'm going to say up here, I want to grab just this here. So what I would do is I'd go span, and then it made the other part, which is fine, but I'm just going to pull it here. So I got span cone, and then in order to select, I could write span up here, but if I have any other spans, it'll do it to all of them. So I'm going to put an ID in here, ID, and I'll just say, you know, cone title or something. And then I'm just going to go up here, and I'm going to do, since it's an ID, it's going to be the pound symbol, and cone title, like that. And then I'm just going to say font size, and we'll make it 24px, and we'll do color. I'm just going to make it orange, like that. Okay. And what that's going to do is when I go, oops, not this thing. When I go back here and Control R, it's going to grab that one section. Okay. Now it's not meant for like grouping big areas. It's almost the opposite, where it's just you're trying to grab a piece of something. All right. This is inline, and this is block level, which we'll talk about later. Okay. So anyway, that's basically inline means that it doesn't start on a new line. When you do block level things, they start on a new line, which means like it's like hitting enter every time you use one. See how like this, and then there's another section. This, you could see, is fine, doesn't start on another line. It just keeps right on going. So anyway, that's what a span does. I don't honestly use spans too awful much. You use divs a lot. Okay, the span you might use if you need to grab something specifically. It'll allow you to do that, but that's the basic lump sum of it. And this will allow you to have quite a bit more control over your elements. Okay. And the next section is going to be this.